Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another 4 p.m. Bible study. My name is Jim Schaefer, and I share with you every Tuesday and Thursday. And right now, we're in the middle of a series entitled Divine Disruption. Today, we're going to be looking at a very unusual story. It's found in the book of Genesis in chapter 32. Now, I have never been much of a rabble rouser in my day. My father was a boxer when he was a young man, and he fought Golden Gloves, and he always shared with us stories of his exploits, and I absolutely loved to listen to his narration of the fights that he had. Me, on the other hand, fighting and I didn't get along real well. I had a couple of skirmishes when I was in middle school, but I was never a fighter. Fighting is disruptive. I can't begin to imagine what a divine disruption it would be to have a fight with God. But that is our story for today. We're going to talk about the man by the name of Jacob and how he wrestled with God. Now, there are a lot of questions that come up that are a part of our story. For example, did he really wrestle with God, physically wrestle with God? Secondly, why is there the reference to man and God in this passage? Who's he really wrestling with? Is it a man or is it God? And then thirdly, who won? If you've got any answers for those questions, I want you to go ahead and just mark them in the chat, and let me know what you think. So let's go ahead and get ready to jump in here. I see that Jeff Pugh is with us. A number of others are here as well. In fact, if you're here, go ahead and give me a shout out. Let me know that you're here. I see quite a number have joined us. I am delighted you're here, but until you make a comment, I'm kind of stuck. So let me know who it might be. Ah, there we go. I see that my wife is here. Robin Sharkey is here. Jeff Pugh is here. Someone else as well. I'm glad that you're here. So let's go ahead and jump in with our story. Today, we're going to talk about this idea of Jacob wrestling with God. Now, I think the first question that we have to ask here is, who was Jacob? So let's kind of do a quick review. We have God calling a man by the name of Abraham. And he has Abraham leave the city of Ur and travel up around the Fertile Crescent down into the area of what is now Israel. And God makes promises to him that he's going to make him a great nation. Now, we heard about that in our last lesson, right? And Abraham will eventually have a son in his old age by the name of Isaac. Now, Isaac, or laughter, if you'll recall, was the son of promise. And we saw in our last lesson that God calls upon Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, a divine disruption. But we see that God spares Isaac, and Isaac becomes and continues to be the child of promise. Isaac is going to give birth to two children, Jacob and Esau. Now we can read about them in chapter 25. We know the story of how Jacob cheated Esau out of his birthright and eventually out of the blessing of the firstborn. We're going to get into that a little bit here as we go through. But what I want you to remember is that Jacob is the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. Now, the Bible makes use of a phrase quite frequently. For example, in the book of Acts, of chapter 7, verse 32, we read, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In fact, this phrase is going to be used 12 times, many more times as it talks about the God of Abraham or the God of Isaac or the God of Jacob. So, who were these three men? Why do they hold such prominence, even as we move into the New Testament? Well, these three men make up primarily what we call the patriarchs of the Old Testament. They are all descendants of Shem, one of Noah's sons, and all three of them are revered in Judaism. And yet, all three of them are far from perfect. That's one of the things about the Bible. The Bible shows us the flaws of the main characters as well as the triumphs. That should give us hope. Well, we find out as we go through this story that God is going to, uh, let me back up. What we're going to see is two times in Abraham's life, he deceives people by claiming that his wife is his sister. The first time was in Genesis 12 while they were in Egypt. The second time occurred in Genesis 20, where he lies to King Abimelech. Now, some will point out that he didn't really lie, right? That Sarah was his half sister. So he was telling the truth of sorts. But we need to understand that even though that might be true, there was no doubt that his claim was meant to deceive both the Pharaoh and King Abimelech. Now, it's interesting to note that Abraham's son Isaac will commit the exact same sin. The nut doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? You can read about that in Genesis chapter 26, where he pulls the same stunt with King Abimelech. Now, it probably is not the same Abimelech, right? It is thought by most Bible scholars that Abimelech was the throne name of whoever was on the throne in Gerar. Um, so again, what I want you to see is Abraham tells this lie twice, and Isaac tells the lie once. So it really shouldn't surprise you when we come to Jacob and for us to find out that just like his father and just like his grandfather, he's a bit of a liar as well. In fact, the name Jacob is a fascinating name. The name Jacob means supplanter or deceiver. In fact, I've got a slide here. Uh, let's take a quick look here at Genesis 25. It says, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. And after that, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. All right. Now, this idea here, Jacob, is a word in the Hebrew that means heel grabber. All right. Or cheater. Deceiver is the word that is most often used. And yet I would call him a cheat. All right. I mean, we're told here that even in birth, his hand is grasping his older brother's heel. Right. The idea, the picture that I want you to see in your mind is two people in a race, and one reaches forward and grabs the other and slows him down so that he can pass him. He's cheating, all right? And we see this in his life. In fact, we are told that he steals the birthright. Esau comes back hungry and from hunting, And Jacob has prepared some stew, and he says, I will give you this stew for your birthright. And Esau figures, I'm hungry. What difference is a piece of paper? And he gives up his birthright. We see that's the first hint of the cheating. And then later on, when Isaac is, they think, dying, uh, he calls for his eldest son Esau in order to bless him, to give him the inheritance, so to speak. And what happens is Jacob dresses up like Esau at his mother's request, and he steals the blessing. So he is a thief, he is a cheater, he is a deceiver. So I think it's important for us to understand the person with whom which we are dealing with in our story today. Now, his name is Heel Grabber, all right, Jacob. God is going to change his name, and probably with good reason. Let's look at it. In chapter 32, uh, Jacob has run away from home because of his conflict with Esau. He knew once he stole the blessing that Esau would probably try to kill him. And so he gets out of there. And you know the story, how he goes, and his cousin Laban tricks him into marrying the oldest daughter after working 10 years. And so he works another 10 and gets Rebecca, his bride. And so it's 20 years since all of this has taken place. And he is heading back home now, and he is about to confront Esau. That's really what chapter 32 is all about. He fears Esau. He knew Esau wanted to kill him 20 years previous. He doesn't know what Esau's feelings are now. So what does Jacob do? Jacob sends ahead gifts to appease him, and he divides his family into two camps for protection. Alone and anxious, Jacob prays for deliverance, acknowledging his own unworthiness and his past unfaithfulness. It is in this setting that Jacob is going to wrestle a mysterious man with whom he wrestles until dawn. Despite a dislocated hip, Jacob persists, refusing to release his opponent until he receives a blessing. The man, revealed to be a divine being, renames Jacob Israel, meaning he who struggles with God, signifying Jacob's perseverance in his struggles with both the divine and the human adversaries. So let's look at our text. And I want to point out a couple of things to you. In Genesis 32, beginning with verse 22, now I want you to notice the number of times that it talks about this person Jacob is going to wrestle with, how many times it refers to him as a man, and how many times it refers to him as God. Which is the truth? Is he fighting a man, or is he fighting God? Verse 22 says, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. Verse 24, so Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. There's the first reference to a man. Verse 25, when the man, there's the second reference, saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. There's the third reference to a man. The text goes on and it says, then the man said, there's number 4, Let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man, there's number 5, asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he replied. Then the man said, there's 6, I think, I've lost count. Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God. Well, there's a reference to God now, and with humans, and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. Then we're told, so Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. So we see the idea that this is a man, but it is also God. So which is it? Comment in the chat there what you think it might be. Who is it that he's referring to there? Is he talking about a God? Is he talking about man? Or is it both? Is this one of those times where we are seeing a pre-incarnate Jesus Christ? Is it possible that that is who Jacob is wrestling? Now, here's another question for you, and I had posed it at the outset. Did Jacob really physically wrestle with God? Now, the easy answer, I know for all of us, is well, we believe the Bible, so yes. But we need to understand that the Bible sometimes does use some poetic language. All right? The Bible sometimes frames things in such a way as telling us a story. And I think this might be one of those incidents. I'm not convinced, and I could be wrong, but I'm not convinced that this is a physical wrestling match. What do you think? Do you think it's a actual physical wrestling match with God? Now, theologians, scholars interpret this story differently. Some interpret it as symbolic, representing Jacob's internal struggles and his journey towards spiritual maturity. It's often seen as an allegory for the struggles that all of us face, especially the struggle to overcome personal flaws and the pursuit in our relationship with God. Have you ever wrestled with God? I know I have. There are times where I have questioned God and argued with God and tried to understand God. Well, this wrestling match can be viewed as a metaphor for Jacob's fight with his own nature and his past actions and in his destiny. I believe that what we're really seeing here is a glimpse into Jacob's prayer life. I see him wrestling with God in prayer. Now, there is a children's book where the main character has an experience when he encounters a mentor who had previously died. And after receiving advice from this deceased mentor, he asks whether what he is experiencing is real or is it just in my head. The response that the mentor gives in this story is fascinating. The mentor says to him, of course it's happening inside your head, but why on earth should that mean it's not real? I see this story in the same light, in the same way. I think it's all taking place in Jacob's mind. But that certainly doesn't mean it's not real. He is wrestling with God in prayer. So the question that I think we need to ask next is who won? Who won this wrestling match. I want you to go ahead and indicate what you think in the comments there. Uh, I appreciate what you're doing so far. So let's take a look at those passages again, two verses in particular. Genesis 32, verse 25 and verse 28. It says, when the man saw that he could not overpower him, so it seems to be indicating that whoever Jacob's wrestling, he realized he couldn't beat him, that somehow Jacob was winning this fight. And it says he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Some would say that the man cheated. Now, again, I don't think we're dealing with those same terms, but he certainly does something that makes it far more difficult for Jacob to win. Verse 28, however, says, then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob. This is after the fight is over, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Now, the word there can mean prevailed, and the New Living Translation says, and you have won. So my question to you as we are bringing this to a close is, how is it possible to wrestle with God and win? Are we any match for God? Is it possible for us to fight against God and prevail and overcome? I don't think that's what the text is telling us here. I think what the text is saying is that you have prevailed, you have lasted, you have held on until you got what you wanted, which was a blessing. This is why I don't see this as a physical fight, but this is a spiritual battle where he is wrestling with God. I might want to share with you and say, I believe that anytime we wrestle with God, we win. Now, you need to understand what I mean by that statement. I don't mean that we get our way. All right? When we wrestle with God, we win because God prevails in our life. When we encounter the living God, our life changes. And I think this is very true with Jacob. Jacob is wrestling with his past and with his present. He knows he has been a sinner. He knows that he has done things wrong throughout his life. And now he has come to God, and God touches him and changes him. He might have lost the fight, but he won the battle. He might have lost his encounter with God, but you can't wrestle with God and lose. You're always going to be far better off after you're wrestling with God. Well, let me share with you a couple of lessons that I think are important for us to see here. Number one, and this is true, I think, in our lives, transformation occurs and comes through struggle. Jacob's encounter teaches us that personal transformation often comes through struggles and challenges. When we come to God as we are, when we come to Him and we talk with Him and we reason with Him, one of the most powerful verses is, come, let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. A struggle with God produces transformation in our life. The second thing is this idea of persistence in faith. It was Jacob's tenacity to hold on for a blessing that demonstrates the importance of persistence in faith. Even when faced with overwhelming challenges, we hold fast to God. I don't think that picture is lost. Jacob is not so much wrestling with this man or with God as he is holding on to him. The whole idea here is I'm not going to let you go until you change me, until you bless me. There is the persistence there that I believe God wants us to see in this passage. The third thing is the divine wrestling match signifies to us that encounters with God can be unexpected and life changing. They often lead to a new identity and a new purpose in our life. This is true. He's no longer going to be the heel grabber, all right? But he is going to be the head of a brand new nation that trusts in God. And finally, we have this subsequent meeting with Esau, his brother, after this wrestling match is done. And I think that idea of reconciliation is an important part of this story. We see that Jacob faced his fears and he struggled and he called on God and he remained steadfast in faith. And when he did, the possibility of healing a broken relationship came to fruition. If you want to see a reconciliation between you and someone else, it may take you wrestling with God. It may take you going to God and holding on and saying, God, change me so that I can restore this relationship. It is a divine disruption. And I believe that the whole idea here is that God wants you and I to hold on to him and to allow him to change our lives. Has there been a divine disruption in your life? Has there been an event where you wrestled with God and you came out of that experience changed? I'd love for you to share it with me in the comments. We'll continue with these divine disruption lessons next week on Tuesday. Until then, I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for being here. I see a number of people that have jumped in, Gail Brown, as well as others. Thank you so much for being here. Again, don't forget, you can see all of my videos on YouTube. The address is there for you. I continue to add them there, and there have been hundreds of views. In fact, my latest report, if I'm not mistaken, was somewhere around 250 views last month alone. So I'm very grateful for that. Please share our Bible studies with your friends and neighbors. I believe we can make a difference in people's lives as we encounter the living God. God bless you. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful weekend. I will see you all next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m.